Welcome everybody. This video will focus on coding through the Module 1 assignment. So I'm just going to read through the instructions here quickly. And what I have is a 16-ounce Monster Energy drink, has a nutrition label stating that each can has 2 8-ounce servings. The label also states that for each 8-ounce serving, the drink has 110 calories, 27 grams of sugar, and 80 milligrams of caffeine. It says, write a console program that asks the user how many cans of Monster they drank today and prints the following: total calories, total grams of sugar, total milligrams of caffeine. They have a sample of the output, so your program might look something like this. It doesn't have to look exactly like this, but this looks pretty good, right? Pretty basic, and it achieves it. Now, they do give a sample input and sample output, which is accurate. So like maybe the first time you run the program, what you want to do is actually feed in the number 3 and see if you get the same numbers on the output. And that'll tell you if your logic is correct, however you achieved it. All right, so if I drink 3 cans, I get to 660 calories. So like one of the things I have to figure out is how did they go from 3 to 660? And part of it lies in the calorie count here. Keeping in mind, each can has 2 8-ounce servings, and per 8-ounce servings, we have 110 calories. So per can, how many calories do I have? Well, I got to double that number, right? Because there's 16 ounces in a can. So all of these numbers will be doubled as part of your formula somehow. Then to figure out the total calories, you just simply multiply against the number of cans. That's really the solution. Right, so that's the math behind it. All right, so let's code this. Here I got Visual Studio. I'm going to go ahead and create this. Try to do it in a somewhat efficient manner here. This is my first launch of Visual Studio for the day, so that's always the slowest one. But not too bad considering. All right, so I'm going to get rid of the pre-configured content here. And what I will tell you is that sometimes I do this, and I'm going to just do it this time just to show you. I'm taking all the instructions from the assignment, and I'm just pasting them into my program, and then I'm using what we call a block level comment. Notice the opening and the closings here. So the opening is a / and a star or asterisk, and then the closing is an asterisk and a /. I could also do the # approach on every line. It just seems pretty cumbersome. Or is it / in this language? I forget. Right. This style of commenting, by the way, is called CSS style because it originates with that language originally. But it is handy, right? Because now all the information is right here on my screen and I don't have to bounce back and forth. So that's tip number 1. Next thing that we're going to do is we are going to prompt the user for information, right? So I would create a statement such as this, and I'm trying to grab it from my other screen here so I don't have to type it. So I'll do a console write, not write line, because we want the cursor on the same line. I'm just going to ask, how many monsters did you drink today? Right? They're going to type something in, and we got to capture that. What I decided to call it on the capture end of it was cans, right? That was what resonated in my head. How many monsters did you drink today? You know, how many cans, right? Because they come in a can. That's where my brain went. You might have called this monster. You might have called it number of beverages. You might have called it whatever. It doesn't really matter what you called it as long as you know what it is. I would caution you though, that when you're naming something, you should name it what it is. So when you look at your code later, you're like, oh yeah, that. Okay, that makes sense. Cans must refer to the number of cans, how many monsters. You know, and I guess if I wanted to be super verbose, I could name it cans of Monster Energy drink. You know, I could get really, super verbose with it. And some programmers do argue for that type of naming convention. We will do our console read line. That will also get converted to an int32 so we can store it in the integer named cans. And remember, like the convention, Everything on the right side of the equal sign, which isn't an equal sign, it's an assignment statement, gets stored in the thing on the left, right? In this case, I'm declaring the variable cans and populating it with information directly from the user's input at the keyboard. Remember, anything a user types at the keyboard comes in as text. That's why we have to do a conversion to make it a number. For those of you that know Python, right, that's the other big language around here. Python is the same way. If we want to do math with those numbers, we got to convert it to a number. Otherwise, the math won't work. Then you're adding letters, which is called concatenation and not math. All right, so this is our capture statement from the user. Now we need to take all those variables or all these pieces of information basically that are provided here and do the calculation. And so here's how I handled it when I wrote it last time. I figured that I need to create a series of integers to hold the value of the true number of calories that were captured and the sugar and the caffeine. So I created a calories variable. And then what I did is I took the 110, I multiplied it by 2 because there's 2 servings in a can. And then I multiplied that by the number of cans. Right. So that gives me the total calories they consumed. And then, I figured, well, I need more variables because I'm also doing sugar. You guys noticing instead of closing the statement, I'm just putting in a comma there. So I'm declaring 3 integers at once here. I'm going to do the same with sugar. So I'm going to multiply 27 times 2 times the number of cans. And I'm putting in a comma and declaring another variable. And I'm spelling that wrong, right? How's caffeine spelled with a EI, right? That's weird. 80 milligrams times 2 times the number of cans. And then, the statement's done. And this is in lieu of, like, these could have been semicolons. And I could have said integer in front of each one of these. So the reason I kind of coded it this way is to show you I can declare 3 things all at once. Right? If I'm declaring a bunch of integers, it saves me typing int a few times. Is it necessarily right or wrong? No, because I could have, just to kind of illustrate the point, I could have done this. Kind of like that. Right. Same difference. Or, I'm giving you a lot of options. I could have just declared int calories, int sugar, int caffeine, not put anything in it, and then later did the calculations and store them in the variable. There's no right or wrong. What order you decide to put them in or how you choose to create them is really kind of all on you. I did the approach that I did because I recognize, and part of this is because of experience, right? That all 3 are going to be integers. All 3 are going to have basically the same calculation. It's okay to declare them all at once, all together, and give them values all at the same time. If you did it a different way, don't go changing your code. As long as you captured the right information, you're okay. Here's the other thing. Some of you might not have even stored these values in a variable. You might have just put it right into the console output statement, right? Some of you guys did that. James, I know you did it that way, right? And that's perfectly fine. So if you ask yourself, why would I do it one way versus another? Why should I maybe store the value versus doing a brute force calculation in an output statement? The answer becomes usually, am I going to use those values again in my program? Well, if the answer is no, you really kind of don't need to store them. This is like a memory management issue with software. If I do plan on using them again, then it really makes sense to store them. Now, mind you, I'm trying to teach you guys a bunch of different concepts here in this first module. So I decided to put it into variables because I thought it would demonstrate that concept. It also kind of makes it a little bit more modular in terms of how we're breaking down the problem. don't overwhelm yourself and try to figure out the math and the output statement all at the same time. If your brain's okay doing that, hey, go for it. What generally is the hard part of learning how to program is breaking down a problem into small enough pieces that you can tackle each of the little tiny pieces, and even understanding that you have to make it little pieces to get the solution. And then you can recombine them if you can. And this like integer technique here is kind of like recombining it a little bit. Right. I do need to output this, and I know you guys probably did a number of different ways of doing output, and I'm going to wager most of you did not do it the way I did it. Right. But I just want to show you what my approach was. I did one statement. Right. Now, check it out. I also used what we call an escape sequence. What does slash or backslash n do?
New line?
Yeah, new line. So instead of having, one console write line for this, another one for that, another one for that, right? I just combine it all together, and then this will push it down to the next line automatically, all with one statement. Okay. Is this the best way to do it? Maybe not, right? But this is the way I chose to do it, also to kind of demonstrate the escape sequence and to give you a different approach. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and hopefully it works. And then we'll try the sample value of 3. All right, so I'm going to kind of pull this off to the side here. How many monsters did you drink today? And let's zoom in just a little bit. I'm going to type 3. And then did we get the same numbers in the exercise description? So let's go take a look. It is up here. 660, 162 grams, 480 milligrams. It looks like all the calculations are correct. And whenever we have these sample screens like this, you should assume that the calculations are correct. So like good input value to try initially would be this. Now, what if, right? And so here's a thought. What if the user only had a half can? All right. So Sam's shaking his head because he knows where I'm going with this. What would happen if I typed in a half can here, like 0.5?
I think it error out because it's not integer, so it won't convert.
Correct. Right. So this is kind of, one of the little things here that, some people would argue, why don't you make this a double instead of an integer? And it would solve that problem. It would. Right. So that would be one solution. But yeah, I'm kind of glad I don't drink these drinks because, man, that's a lot of calories. All right. So let's just put in, I don't know. I drank 12 of these today, yeah, that's like a whole day's worth of calories for sure. All right. So folks, this is my solution. You may have done some of this in a similar fashion, but maybe a little bit different, and that's okay. But if you're getting the same results and the calculations are correct, then your solution is acceptable. All right. This video ends here, so I'm going to stop the recording.